Lately, I've received a number of emails from our viewers about, well, frankly, the untimely death of the Genesis brand and what's going on with their sales. Why have sales of the G90, which I'm standing right here next to, why have they tanked? Why have sales of the G80 also tanked? And why have we not seen any G70 sedans on the roads in America? Is it a conspiracy theory? Is there something wrong with the cars? What's going on? Helping fuel the fire, we've seen a number of articles out there in even major publications that have claimed that the reason that Genesis sales are off for 2018 is that they don't have any crossovers in their lineup, and that somehow explains sales that have dropped 60, 70, or 80% year on year. Quite frankly, crossovers are not the problem. You see, even if Genesis had a crossover to sell in the United States, there actually wouldn't be very many dealers that could sell them. To understand what's happening now, we have to go back in time a little bit. The Genesis brand started out as Hyundai models. Hyundai realized they had a good thing going with the original Genesis sedan and the Equus sedan because sales of those two models were actually very good in the luxury midsize and luxury full-size segments. So they decided to go forth and create a brand new luxury brand, the Genesis brand, which is what makes this G90 right in front of me. Toyota didn't do this with Lexus. They didn't create a Toyota Lexus, then decide, hey, we have a good thing going here. Let's call the brand a Lexus and call the model an LS400. So the path to the Genesis of the Genesis brand is quite different, and that is important to understand because Genesis models were up until now sold at Hyundai dealers. They were dealers that Hyundai had decided should be allowed to sell the Genesis products through whatever means they have decided that. The number of dealers is key here because up until recently, there were hundreds and hundreds of dealers in the US where you could buy a Genesis G80 or G90. They realized that this was not the best path forward because if they kept that number of dealers, then dealers would be selling maybe one car or two cars a month. That's not really sustainable, not really enough to make that dealer really improve things to the standards that a luxury car dealer should have. So they needed to reduce the dealer network so that way the overall dealer volume, cars sold per month, would be similar to something like a Lexus dealer or a BMW dealer, an Audi dealer, etc. And Hyundai gave this the good old college try, but they ended up failing a little bit because they got sued by some dealers. Some of them were in Louisiana. The dealers won because they claimed that Hyundai was acting preferentially to their dealer network and that wasn't allowed under Louisiana law. They wanted all dealers to be able to sell Genesis models. Hyundai and Genesis realized that it was not sustainable to have such a large dealer network. If they wanted to be a full-on luxury brand and they really wanted to have Genesis treated equally with BMW, Mercedes, Audi, etc., they needed to stand on their own. They needed their own dealer network. Even if some of those dealers were temporarily right next to a Hyundai dealer, they had to be more separate. So they did the only thing they really could do after the aftermath of that lawsuit. They decided to create Genesis Motor America to distribute, import the vehicles, etc. in the United States. They then had to get distribution licenses in the appropriate states. They had to sell new franchise dealers in all 50 states. That's the important consideration here because when you buy a car, you're buying a car from a franchise dealer. They fall under franchise laws in the United States. So you're not going to Best Buy and picking up a car. You're not going to just a retailer that has simply bought it and is reselling it. The process is a little peculiar when it comes to cars. The franchise dealer network is really the hiccup here because at the moment, there are only 45 dealers in the entire United States that can sell you a 2019 model year Genesis. That's because all 2019 model year Genesis vehicles are being imported, distributed, etc. by a different company than the 2018 model year vehicles were. So when you look at the meteoric sales slide from the beginning of the year down to about September or October of 2018, the reason that the sales have tapered off is because they've run out of cars. They imported all the 2018 model years that they built. They've all been practically sold. Now there are no Genesis models to sell. And that's why when you look around and you look at those Hyundai dealers that had the Genesis logo on their dealership, you look at their websites, maybe they'll have one or two G80s or G90s left, but there are not very many left in the whole country, and there are no 2019s on their website. However, if a dealer has signed a new franchise agreement to sell Genesis vehicles, then you will see the 2019 model year vehicles, including the new G70 Compact Sedan, on their website, and that is the difference here. At the moment, there are no franchise dealers in the states of California, Texas, Florida, Washington, Oregon, and a number of major states in the US. California buys about 10% to 15% of all the cars in the US. So if you can't sell a Genesis in California, your sales aren't going to be where they should be. Now, we do expect to see this rectified soon. I hear that there are some franchise dealers that have actually been signed in Florida, but they now have to undergo a little bit of a waiting period, so they should be able to sell you Genesis models in Florida in the next 30 days. We haven't heard, but I suspect that California and Texas are very close, and they will likely be able to be selling Genesis vehicles in those states by the end of the year. To go back to the original premise of this video, a number of articles out there have suggested that the lack of crossovers is the problem for Genesis sales. Well, a crossover wouldn't fix this problem, because even if you had a crossover to sell, again, there would be no dealers to sell your crossover in. That also wouldn't explain the fact that the G80 and G90 in 2017 really sold very well. I know I've talked to a lot of people out there that have said, oh, the G80 and G90, they're not selling all that well. But let's review the numbers. I happen to have them in my pocket right here. Back in 2017, the G90 was the 4th best-selling large luxury sedan in America. This actually beat the Lexus LS in terms of overall sales. In fact, it managed to outsell the LS, the 6 Series, the Audi A8, the Jaguar XJ, and the Maserati Quattroporte, although the Quattroporte probably wasn't hard to outsell. The G80, despite its age and the fact that it really hasn't changed too much since it was last released as a Hyundai model in America, it also sold incredibly well. It was also the 4th in its segment. Now, the Mercedes E-Class and CLS are combined together for 51,000 units. We then had the 5 Series at 40,000. The A6 drops way down to 16,300, and the G80 only undersold the A6 by 200 cars in the entire United States. That means that the G80 outsold the Cadillac CTS by 6,000 units, the Lexus GS by 9,000 units, the Infiniti Q70 by 10,000, and the Jaguar XF by 12,000 units. Now, when you look at that picture and you look at the 2018 model year vehicles, you'd say clearly something went wrong. The what went wrong was not a crossover, however, it again is the dealer network. Obviously, this was a misstep. There's no way to spin that one. Genesis clearly and Hyundai clearly got this wrong. I think they could have timed it better. I think they could have foreseen the problems that they would have in that dealer network and tried to get ahead of the problem by setting up the separate entity and changing the distribution network a little bit earlier. But they didn't. Instead, they had to react with what was going on with the lawsuits and everything going on around their dealer network, and that is why we have what we have for 2019. Now, we don't know exactly how many dealers there will be in 2019. We don't know what the sales will be like in 2019, but I expect that sales of the G70, G80, and G90 will pop right back up there to probably 4th or 5th in their segments overall. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. Also, let me know if you have managed to see an actual new 2019 Genesis on a dealer lot in the states of California, Texas, Oregon, Washington, Florida, etc. Let me know down there in the comment section below. Again, we do know that there are some dealers that have been signed in Florida, but they don't have inventory yet because they have a waiting period and all the other paperwork, etc. that goes on with the new franchise dealer agreement. Be sure and stay tuned because we do have a full review on the 2019 Genesis G70 coming up, and then we'll have a quick review of this 2018 Genesis G90 on our channel as well. We do expect to see a few modifications for 2020. We'll talk about what we know as well. I'll see you next week.